Hey, Black Belt Reads. So, we're about halfway through September. It's almost horror season. Usually, October, I pretty much exclusively read horror books. So, I got 10 today. I've got 9 novels, one graphic novel. One of the novels was an audiobook, and one of them I read digitally. The rest of them I read old school, book in your hand. So, I'm going to try to sort of scale it to where at the beginning it's less intense, and as we go, they'll get more horror, more intense, kind of. So, with that being said, we'll start off very nice and easy. Harrow County. One of the reasons I'm showing this is because I just saw that they are releasing an omnibus of Harrow County, a complete hardcover collection. This is the library edition. It's only the first one. I think there's 3 or 4. This is the only one I have, but I have read the series, and it's so good. It is Southern horror. You've got evil twins. You've got witches, ghosts, monsters. You've got a boy who is nothing but skin. It's very, very weird. The most famous cover from this series, I think maybe it's one of the first covers of the series, is that boy who is just made up of only skin. So the art is absolutely amazing. Written by Cullen Bunn, drawn by Tyler Crook. So if you haven't ever checked out Harrow County, it's very light on the horror, but it's got some pretty creepy stuff in there. Look at I think that's actually the boy that's made out of skin. It's been a while since I've read it, but I want to revisit it when they release the complete hardcover collection. So that's a good one if you're not really big into horror or comics. That's a really good place to jump on. One of my favorite books that doesn't get talked about very much. I don't ever hear anybody talk about it really, but I loved it, man. It's Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. It's yeah, it's about a boy who has an imaginary friend who tells him to do things. It's pretty long. I enjoyed every second of this book. Mr. Chbosky, he's a really good writer. He's got a couple other books that I want to read. I haven't yet, but I think this is his only horror novel. There are several scenes in this book that stand out to me. There's a scene with a cartoon cat, and it's like it legitimately scared me. It gave me the creeps. And that's hard for a book to do. This is obviously at the beginning of the list. It's not really horrifying in any way. It's got a lot of really dark themes, child abuse, that sort of thing, but it's not overly scary. It's more a really well written horror novel, which is right up my alley. I love really high level writing, and I love horror. So anytime those things come together, I usually really dig it. So, Imaginary Friend up next. So, not too scary, but again, The Return by Rachel Harrison. It has a couple of scenes in it that gave me the creeps as well. Have you ever been reading a book alone at nighttime, and that is the best time to read horror because it start to give you the creeps, like you hear the little ticks in your house and it's dark, you're wondering, somebody out there. There's a scene where she thinks somebody might be looking through her window inside at her, and I've had that feeling before. I'm sure everybody's had that feeling. It's written very well. It's basically about a group of friends, and one of the friends disappears for a while, and when she returns, she is different. It's good. I really liked this one. I have a couple other Rachel Harrison books that I haven't read yet, so maybe I'll do one of those this Halloween season. Actually, that's a good idea. So, up next, another one of my favorite books that I've read in the last 5 years or so is The Only Good Indians. Stephen Graham Jones. I think a lot of people are sort of conflicted on this guy, but man, I loved this book. This, again, it's not like overtly scary, but it has one of the most shocking scenes that I've ever read in a book. I was actually reading this in a public place. I was actually getting my car serviced, and I was sitting there reading it at the dealership. And I mean, I like, had a visceral reaction to a specific scene in this book that I did not see coming. Maybe because I was in a public place. I mean, I was really absorbed in the book, but I did not see the scene coming, and it freaked me out. And I really like Stephen Graham Jones. His writing is really good. I think some people struggle with the way he writes because he's sort of odd, sort of hard to follow, maybe a little bit. I love it. I love it. I love that kind of thing. I've liked everything I've read from him so far. Next up, this is going to be the one audiobook on the list. It is It Waits in the Woods by Josh Malerman. This is the only book by Josh Malerman that I have read. He's got a lot of books. I want to read more, but I specifically wanted to put this one on the list because it is an audiobook and the narrator did such a great job. I think it's like one of those Amazon Audible exclusives. I don't know if there even is a physical version of this book. I know you can read it on Kindle, but I did the audiobook and I'm so glad I did because the narrator did such a good job. She has a very melodic, slow narration that it just sucked me in. And I don't know if I liked the story as much as I just liked her narration of the story. But it was good and it's creepy. And I liked that whole series of short stories they released. I think it was last year. I pretty much liked every one of those Audible exclusive ones. So I think the next Joe Hill book is going to have his in it, like his collection of short stories, and that one will be in it, I think. Anyway, really, really liked that one. I would check that one out. I'm pretty sure you can get them if you have Audible Plus. You can read them for free when you pay for the subscription. So that being said, I will go ahead and throw up the most sexual book on the list. It is, of course, Mr. Clive Barker, Coldheart Canyon. So if you like really gross, raunchy, disturbing sex scenes, Clive Barker's the guy for you for sure. And Coldheart Canyon is one of his most notoriously perverted books. There is a scene that I absolutely do not want to think about again, so I'm going to just stop right there. If you have not read the book, it's good. It's like a haunted house ghost mystery kind of um, celebrity culture. I think Clive Barker was writing a lot from sort of becoming famous at this point in his life, and yeah, there's like orgies and things that happen in the book, and it's like ghost orgies, I should say, and it's pretty fucked up, a lot of it. Next up, we're getting into some pretty dark territory now. I'm gonna say The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. I won't say anything about this book because this is one of those books that really benefits you if you don't know anything about it going into it. Just know that it is a mind boggling mystery horror fiction. It's really, really well done. There are some extremely disturbing scenes in this novel, and I think a lot of people at a certain point will kind of understand what's happening, but I didn't really until it's just kind of laid out for you. I didn't really know what was going on. Don't be scared. Don't be intimidated. It's really short. You can read it in just a couple days, and it's it's pretty popular, I think, for the twist of it. You get a perspective of a cat, famously, which is really fun, and it's just really well written. I really want to read some more from Catriona Ward. This is the only one I've read. I have one other book from her up there on the shelf that I want to get to. Moving into one of my favorite books of all time, The biggest book on the list, the most difficult book on the list, the most unique book on the list, and probably the most famous book on the list too, House of Leaves. If you've never heard of House of Leaves, it is one of the most fun, unique, strange books, and it's actually scary. There, it's a it is a house that is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. And you may have heard that sort of notion before, but I think this is the best that it's ever been done. Maybe one of the first real instances of that idea. They're a family that moves into a home and they realize that there are rooms that don't appear to show on the outside, that are on the inside of the house. So they kind of dig into it more, and the house appears to be growing from the inside, and it ends up, this huge dark hallway that is impossible because when you look at the house from the outside, it's just a normal house. Yeah, one of the coolest books I've ever read. Very tough because it's famously very disorienting. There's actually a picture of an upside down house, right on. It is read in a very strange way where there's a ton of footnotes that have you hopping back and forth throughout the book. It's got books that only have like a few words on them, pages that only have a few words on them, pages that are upside down, pages that you have to read in a mirror, pages in different sort of fonts, and it's just very cool. I really would like to read some more Mark Danielewski. I'm a little intimidated because this was a tough read. It took me a while to get through this, but I'm so glad I did, and it became one of my favorite books that I think about all the time, and some of my favorite characters also. So, speaking of favorite books, I wouldn't say this is one of my favorite books necessarily, but it is definitely one of my favorite endings of a book ever. Can't really have a horror list without throwing some Stephen King, and I thought Revival really doesn't get talked about very much. And this is absolutely beautifully written. I love the way King writes characters, and this is one of those books where you get a character as a small child all the way up to the end of his life when he's an old man. And that is, who better to do that than King? It's wonderful. But all that being said, it is probably the most horrifying ending of a book ever. If you really think about the ending and what it means, and if it were a real thing, it is absolutely awful. It is horrible, horrifying. The the most the the biggest nightmare of all time, really. Obviously, I won't spoil it. Check out Revival. It's about a preacher who maybe dips into a little bit of Frankenstein territory. But that's not really the best parts of the book. The best parts, in my opinion, are Jamie, the main character, and just him growing up through his life, being having a lot of trauma and becoming addicted to drugs and then getting off of it. The way he gets off of it, of course, is a huge part of the book. And yeah, really like this one. Last book, last one, definitely the most disturbing, and again, one of the most famous, but The Girl Next Door by Jack Ketchum. No monsters, no supernatural, no ghosts, nothing like that. Just a lady and a group of kids and what they are capable of doing to other human beings. Yeah, one of the grossest, saddest, most disturbing. Don't really ever want to read it again, but glad I read it. I mean, I would read it again. But again, I would like to read some more Jack Ketchum, but this book, you got to be in the right mindset to read something like this. Definitely not for the weak of heart. especially when you know that it is based off of a true story, and the true story might even be more horrifying than the novel. Yeah. Yeah, so that's it, guys. That is 10 books maybe you could read for the upcoming horror season. If you have read any of these, I'd love to hear your thoughts on them, or if anything sounded interesting, let me know. And if you like what I'm doing here, please consider subscribing. Thanks.